All right, we now welcome on Brendan Marks. He covers UNC and Duke for The Athletic. Brendan, how we doing?
Doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. So let's start this off. Give us your backstory. Like, where are you from? How'd you end up at The Athletic?
I started out as I feel like most sports journalists, I love sports playing up. And then when I realized as a 5'9" unathletic dude that I was probably not going to go very far with that. So sort of pivoted into writing and realizing that you could still make a living in the sports industry. And I attended North Carolina for the journalism school. I know a lot of my Duke followers like to give me some hate for that, but ended up going to UNC for journalism, covering the basketball and football teams there, and was able to parlay that into some cool opportunities with the Boston Globe. And right out of school, I got a job with Sports Illustrated, and then was able to find something a little closer to home. I went and worked for the Charlotte Observer for a couple of years, covered the Carolina Panthers, and from there just kept trying to get my way back to the Triangle. I'm very, very glad and fortunate to be able to cover such incredible programs, great coaches, and to be so close to my family.
So since you cover UNC, so you're a Tar Heel fan, right? Even though you cover Duke.
I'm not. Unfortunately, the one thing they don't tell you about this job is that once you're in it, you sort of lose your fandom.
Hmm.
So when I was in school, obviously, yeah, I would go to games and cheer them on as I could. But in the years since then, the only sports fandom that I actually maintain, unfortunately, is for the New York Jets. So it's a tough life, but I just root for the best story at this point.
This is a safe place. If you're a Carolina fan, you can say it.
I'm genuinely not like, I get this question a lot, like last year,
Oh
especially.
yeah, I've seen on Twitter.
Yeah. I mean, like last year when UNC and Duke were playing, I got so many comments and everyone's like, are you rooting for UNC? Are you rooting for Duke? And genuinely, the way that Duke won last year's game, like the Trey Jones buzzer beater, the Wendell
Hmm.
Moore buzzer beater, those are great for me because that's a
Yeah,
great moment that everyone wants to read about. It's a great story I get to tell, and it's so obvious that it means I get to go home faster too. So whatever gives me the best story or lets me get back to my house the quickest is what I'm a fan of. Fortunately, usually winning helps the cause though.
yeah. We see guys like Jay Billis. I mean, let's be honest. He's kind of a Carolina guy now.
I am actually pretty surprised at the level of vitriol that I feel like he gets from Duke fans. I feel like
I
they
mean,
don't
it's
they
so
don't love him.
blatant. It's so blatant in these games where he just like tries to be a little overly non-biased, it feels like.
Yeah, I like Jay. I respect Jay. I knew him.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
got to know him when I was in Charlotte. Um, yeah, I mean, I that's the thing. Like in college, here's everyone has come from somewhere. So if you don't hold a special affinity, like I know Jay still loves the guys at Duke. He still has a
Hmm.
special connection to the program and and his even more so because he even worked there. He didn't just go there.
Yeah.
So I understand it, but yeah, everyone obviously has a soft spot to some extent for the places they go. Like I have a great relationship with the people at UNC, but I'd like to think that hopefully I do with the people at Duke too.
All right, so let's just get UNC out of the way. It feels like they're starting to hit their stride. So why is that?
Yeah, for sure. I think UNC goes 6-1 in the month of January, and a big part of the reason why it's really not that complicated. It's just better shot selection, and
Hmm.
guys are getting the shots that they deserve. So what I mean by that is Caleb Love, whose shooting percentages over the first 2 months of the season were god awful, ghastly. Um, he finally is taking fewer shots. He was taking at one point almost a third of UNC's shots when he was on the floor, which is far,
Hmm.
far too many, even if he was hitting at a higher clip. So now he's dropping back down, and you're seeing the shares of shots rise for Garrison Brooks, Armando Bacot, Dayron Sharp, the guys who are more efficient. And so as a result, the offense looks better. The ball movement is better. I mentioned Caleb Love and some of the inefficiencies he had at the start of the year. He's finally not turning the ball over every single time.
Yeah.
Which is a big help. And so I think better shot selection and just these young players, which is the case we're seeing in all of college basketball,
Hmm.
young players getting more time together, gelling, and the product ends up being better as a result.
So it feels like Kerwin Walton's UNC's most important player lately. I mean, he's literally Kenny Williams 2.0.
It's such an interesting situation because this is a dude who signs with UNC like literally in late April. Like
Yeah.
he's one of the last commits to sign. And when I talked to his high school coach at the time, I was like, what? No offense, but like, why? Kerwin's not a top 100 recruit. Why did the coaching staff reach out to him and feel so strongly about him? And they, his high school coach said to me, UNC needed a shooter, and that's what they got. So, yeah. I mean, he the way he has stretched the floor for the bigs inside, I mean, I think a lot of teams are still packing the paint against UNC because he's the only dependable shooter. But just having him out there, the gravity that he pulls as a sub 100 freshman is truly astonishing. So yeah, he's definitely been a big part of how everything has worked too.
Which UNC players do you think leave for the draft?
It's actually a great question. I talked to a couple of NBA teams last week, 3 separate teams, and 2 of them told me that they have Day'Ron Sharpe firmly as a lottery pick, and the third one said that they have him sort of slotted in now just generally in the first round. We're waiting to see a little bit more as the season went on. So I think the opportunity is going to be there for him. If he goes or not, I think it's going to be much more of a personal decision than people would think it would be. He grew up a UNC fan. Like, this is his dream school. Like, he loves it enough. And I think one discounted fact is, like, he hasn't had the UNC basketball experience, just like, the Duke freshmen haven't had the Duke basketball experience. Like, they haven't had a Pac Smith Center, a Pat Cameron. So for most people, I would say that, like, that is not a major factor, but for him, and given how he sort of viewed UNC growing up, it really is. So I would ultimately suspect that he leaves. He'll definitely have the opportunity to do so, but beyond him, it's sort of a toss up. I mean, Caleb Love, I think, can work his way back into the first round with a strong second half of the season. But scouts are just sort of shocked at how poorly he's played the first half of the year. Armando Bacot is a guy who's getting a couple of nods, but I think just in general, the NBA would like to see him come back and expand his range outside of 5 feet. He's basically a non-factor. And then Garrison Brooks. I mean, he's an interesting, versatile defender. His offensive game hasn't progressed, I think, quite the way that the NBA would have liked for it to, but I'd be surprised if he doesn't come back, that is, because he has the extra year of eligibility. I would be surprised if he didn't at least earn a summer league invite.
Yeah. Does UNC make the tournament?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I think
it's a question, but
yeah, I think they definitely do. It's just a matter of how high. Now, as for Duke, on the other hand, I think that's much more of a question.
That was the next question, was, does Duke make the tournament?
Yeah.
The ESPN BPI thing, which I don't take a lot of account into, has 21.9% chance of them making the tournament. I
would say it's better than that.
Yeah.
But I do think it's very much still up in the air. I mean, I think that the idea that Duke is quote unquote back after beating an inconsistent Georgia Tech team, which was not a dominant win, but a good win. And then Clemson, everyone says, this is a good win. And it is, just when you look at sort of Clemson's resume, but the Tigers are in a tailspin right now. They've lost 4 of their last 5 by 18 or more. I think their average margin of loss is 23.5 points. I mean, they can't offense right now. So, so when you consider that, and you consider, does Duke have a quad 1 win yet? No. Does Duke have a marquee win yet? No. And I think those opportunities are going to be coming up really quickly. I was actually just making my calendar for the month, and you talk about some of these games that are coming up. If Duke beats UNC on Saturday, that's the best win of the season easily. So I think it's going to take an incredibly strong February for Duke to get back into that conversation still. And then again, is there an ACC tournament or not? That is something that for a school like Duke, having that versus not having that could be the difference in whether they get in.
Yeah, that's the weird thing. What's going on with all that? Are people just opting out because of the whole COVID testing thing for the tournament, or what?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of factors. Number one, put yourself in the shoes of, one of the bottom feeder teams. If you're Boston College or Wake Forest, not Wake Forest, but if you're Boston College or Notre Dame, you know that you're probably not going to win more than one game. There's no chance you're going to the tournament. And really, what do you have to gain by going to Greensboro to play a game? Not a lot. So, I think if I'm Mike Bray, at the end of the year, my guys have been sequestered. They've had a lot of mental fatigue just trying to get through the season. There's nothing tangibly for them to gain. Why go? Why not opt out? Why risk, further potentially exposing yourself or your players? So I do think you're going to see some opt-outs as a result of that. So, behind the scenes, the ACC is discussing everything. They're talking about, is there a way to do, little pods of teams so you're guaranteed more than one game? Is there a way to, alter the bracket so that if teams opt out, teams aren't, penalized, and we can still make it all the way through? And then on the flip side of, if you're a bad team and you have nothing to gain, if you're a team like Virginia and
Exactly.
you know you're going to make it into the tournament, what's the benefit? Obviously it would be nice to win the ACC tournament, but if that potentially, if you get COVID and you risk not being able to play in the NCAA tournament, the NCAA tournament is not going to pause for COVID. There's going to be forfeits. Cases are going to happen, and there are going to be teams that don't get to play as a result of it. You don't want to be one of those teams.
Let's say there's forfeits. Are they just going to supply in like the 69th team, the 60 or the 70th team, the 71st team?
I think what you're going to see, as I understand it, is if there's a team that's unable to play because of COVID, and I think this is going to be much more of a problem early on, because once teams get to Indianapolis, I think
it'll be good.
I think you can bubble relatively safely, but I think certainly in the first two rounds, before you get to the Sweet 16, if there's a team that doesn't have players, they're going to have to play without them. And if they don't have enough players to play, my understanding is that there will be forfeits, and that you won't bring in replacement teams. You will just act as if that was a loss. So again, it's fair, not really, but the whole idea of that, I think, has gone out the window this season.
Yeah, because why would Gonzaga go play in the West Coast Conference tournament?
Exactly. There's nothing to gain, only things to lose. So I think, it'll be on a team by team, conference by conference basis. But I think the NCAA selection committee is going to have a much tougher job as a result of some of the uncertainty with that.
Yeah, let's just pray they let Duke in, whatever their record is. Okay, let's transition back to Duke a little bit. It feels like you mentioned like Duke is back. Not really. Let's hold the brakes. But how important was this past week getting wins against Georgia Tech and Clemson?
Yeah, I think just from a confidence perspective, it's huge. Like you have everyone talks about Duke's freshmen and how young they are, and but they have freshmen every year. I was looking this up for another story I'm working on. If memory serves, Duke is the 343rd youngest team in college basketball. They're like the 8th least experienced team in the whole sport this year. And their average age of player is half the national average. So the youth factor is really it's not being overblown. I mean, that is a serious thing. And I think when you have a group like that, and a group that has the expectations at a place like Duke, 3 straight losses is enough to push you to the breaking point. And even if you were playing better in some of those losses, not getting the end result still really hurts. So getting those wins, I think, from a conference perspective really helps. But also, you start to find things that work. And as you slowly discover those, you make yourself more dangerous. So I think the 2 things that stood out to me the most from this past week were one, Duke's ball movement was better than it has been all season by leaps and bounds. I mean, I think Jordan Goldwire actually was sort of the epitome of that. In the first half of the Clemson game, he didn't score, didn't have a point, but he had 4 or 5 assists. He was Mr. Hockey Assist. He didn't even look to shoot the basketball, but that was more beneficial than if he had, because him getting the ball and passing to an open, even if it's Wendell Moore in the corner waiting for a 3, it's more beneficial for Duke's offense than him holding it, stagnating things, and messing up the flow of play. So I think it was really important and also the second thing I'll say beyond that was I think that Mark Williams, not that he's someone who's capable of playing 25 minutes a game right now, but I think the dimension that he adds to Duke on both ends of the floor is something that no other player on the roster is capable of. Like, he changes the way that teams both defend and attack Duke when he's on the floor. And if he's able to give Coach K 10 to 20 minutes a game, depending on opponent, I think that that's enough of a different look that he can be an X factor for the rest of the season.
Yeah, he played huge, and he's going to have to play huge against Carolina in their bigs. I mentioned that. I tweeted at you or whatever on Saturday. So what's their best 5 going forward?
I think you're sort of seeing it present itself. So the front court's easy. It's Matthew Hurt and Jalen Johnson. On the wing, I still like Wendell Moore as a starter, and I think that he has been much better of late. He had 3 threes against Clemson. That tied his career high from a couple of weeks ago against Pitt. So even though he's not as consistent or hasn't had maybe the breakthrough sophomore season that I think a lot of fans would have hoped for from him, he's playing better, and he's making contributions even when he's not putting the ball in the hole. So that's really important. So I tend to think that the Roach, Stewart, Moore, Hurt, Johnson lineup works best. And that group does give up some size. They give up some rebounding. But I think that Jalen Johnson is a better help side defender. Like, I think the combination of Matthew Hurt with Jalen Johnson as a help side defender right now is probably more effective than Matthew Hurt with Mark Williams, just because I think that Jalen's versatility on that end of the floor covers up a lot of the different vulnerabilities that Matthew has. But yeah, Goldwire has to continue to have a huge part. He can't just sort of fade into nothingness. Mark Williams, like I said, he has to have a part. Jamin Brakefield, he needs to have a part. So yeah, but I think that the five from that Coach K has been going with of late has been a unit that he'll continue to roll with.
If Duke doesn't make the tournament, how much blame should go to Coach K?
I don't think much, if all, if any. I mean, I won't say that I think this is one of his better coaching jobs, strictly in terms of record. I don't think you can say that. But in terms of the way that he has kept these guys motivated and the way that he hasn't quit on the season, back in December when they canceled the non-conference slate, I saw so many people taking his comments out of context about what, evaluating quote unquote, this idea of what are we doing here? He never called for the season to end. He never called for a pause. He was just saying we need to seriously look at the situation. And I think that we should 100%. He's in line. So knowing that he's at risk personally, knowing that he's had close family contract COVID, knowing that he had less time in the summer and fall to actually work with his guys. The assistant coaches did a lot more in the build up to the year than he would normally do. When you add all that up and you add how he's deflected the attention away from these young guys and back onto himself, I really think he's done a masterful job. So I think that the blame that he would hold would be a recruiting blame. It would be in terms of this roster construction, in terms of the specific players. If Duke has someone like a Cade Cunningham or Scotty Barnes or Zaire Williams, how different do things look? Obviously, not all of that is within his control, but if there's any blame for him, that would be the only realm where I would place it. I really think that the job he's done outside of that, in spite of the record, has been really, really commendable.
Okay, so we're recording this around noon Eastern on Monday, February 1st. Duke's an 11-point favorite against Miami tonight. Do you see Duke covering that?
Ooh, 11?
11. At Miami.
At Miami. I'm assuming Likes isn't going to play. And McGusty, I'm not sure if McGusty will. I would need to know if Isaiah Wong doesn't play or if he is in any way still, I know that he went down last game with an ankle or some sort of leg ailment. If he doesn't play, Duke will cover. If he does play, then Duke won't.
Okay, so it's finally Duke Carolina week. This game is at Cameron on Saturday. Who wins and why?
I think that UNC wins the first game, and I think it's because their strength matches up really, really well with Duke's weakness, which is interior defense. At some point, Matthew Hurt is going to have to defend at Garrison Brooks and Armando Bacot at Day'Ron Sharp in the post, and I'm not sure that he can do that with any real effectiveness without fouling.
Yeah, he's going to get into foul trouble.
Right. So if he gets into foul trouble, and Mark Williams, again, we mentioned he's coming along, but is he physical enough to hang with those guys? And I don't believe so yet. So I think that that's going to be an issue. UNC is not a great free throw shooting team, but I think even just getting Hurt off the floor for a substantial amount of time will be difficult. I think there's a chance that Jalen Johnson gets in foul trouble. So I think that there's not really a good way for Dukes to defend UNC's front court. At the same time, I'll say this. I think if a couple of Duke's perimeter players really get going in a strong way, I think there's a chance that it gets a little more interesting. But I do think that Carolina has the perimeter defenders to match up well with Duke in that regard. So that's why I would lean for North Carolina, at least in the first matchup. Yeah,
it feels a little bit like 2016 with those undersized Brandon Ingram teams against Carolina, who was so much better. And you never know what's going to happen in these Duke Carolina games. Somehow Carolina could be the worst team ever. And you saw last year, they were 9-16, and they freaking go and force Duke into 2 buzzer beaters.
Exactly. So, I mean, I was recording another podcast earlier today, and we were talking, even if you go back to 94, 95, Duke's last real bad team, when the year that Coach K missed with back surgery, Jeff Capel hits a half court buzzer beater to force overtime in that game too.
Yeah.
So like, it doesn't matter how good these teams are. They always make a great game. And I think this one, the thing that's unfortunate is just that there's not going to be anyone there. Like, I feel bad for, both the UNC and Duke freshmen who are not going to get the full experience this year, because even the UNC guys love going to a full Cameron. Like, that's one of the reasons they go to Carolina, is to go in and play bad guy there.
Okay, so you've covered Duke and UNC. Give me your best story covering each of those schools.
Oh, my best story. Okay. I don't know if best necessarily for UNC fans, but for Duke, I think it is that game last year against UNC. I mean, there are good Duke UNC games, and then there are legendary ones. There are historic ones. There are ones that are going to go into the canon. Like, so I said this last year when it first happened, but I'm very much of the mindset that we will talk in 5 years about the Trey Jones, Wendell Moore game, the same way that for the past 10 years, we've talked about the Austin Rivers game.
Yep.
Like you don't have to know all of the specifics, but you know that one part.
Yeah, or like the Danny Green dunk on Greg Paulus.
Exactly. So I think Marvin Williams when he was a freshman. So I think I think that was probably my best from the Duke perspective. And as far as UNC is concerned, my best story, I know what it is. Last year, UNC is playing at Wake Forest, the game that they would lose in pretty humiliating fashion. And I wrote after the game sort of an obit of sorts. And this was before the pandemic onset and everything. And I remember going and talking to a couple of the UNC staffers after that game and saying to them, like, tournament's really not looking like it, be interested to see you guys in the NIT. And their response, pretty unanimously was, oh, if we don't make the tournament, we're done. We're not sitting through any more of this shit. So, which I can't blame them, but like the self-honesty there, I really love. But yeah, I mean, there's so many cool moments behind the scenes, just like, getting to meet Mike Krzyzewski, obviously, for the first time. That was very cool for me. I have some personal things like Roy Williams. I'm very fortunate that he knows my family. So if I've had family issues, he always sort of reaches out. So it's those sort of things that are just as cool as anything that happens on the court.
All right. Well, Brendan, thanks for your time. This was a lot of fun. I'd love to have you back on right before ACC NCAA tournament time, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm always down to talk some triangle hoops.
Of course. Anything to plug?
Got a story coming out soon that I'm not sure how much Duke fans will like, but I've been actually doing one for later this week that I think will be a lot of fun, both for UNC and for Duke fans in advance of Saturday's game.
And where can people find that?
At The Athletic. If you don't have a subscription, I mean, I'm biased, but I think our coverage is best in the world, whether it's college basketball, NFL, anything. Go check us out. We've got subscription promotions right now. We'd love to have any new followers and subscribers.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man.
Of course.